You wake up in darkness. The air is damp. Cold stone presses against your back. Above you, a torch sputters and hisses, dripping hot wax onto the floor. Shadows crawl across the walls, and every surface is slick with mold. You inhale and gag. The stench is overwhelming: sweat, rot, dried blood, and something worse. Burned flesh clings to the walls like a ghost that never leaves. You hear chains rattle somewhere in the gloom. Iron hinges scream as a heavy door clanks shut. And then, faintly, you realize those screams echoing down the corridor. They are not yours. Not yet. Your wrists are already shackled, your ankles chained. You are trapped in the one place everyone fears. The place no prisoner survives with their sanity intact. This is not a movie. This is not exaggeration. This is a medieval torture chamber. And you would not last 5 minutes. Look around. The chamber is not grand, it is not meant to be. It is a stone vault buried beneath a fortress, a castle, or even beneath the steps of a church. Thick walls keep sound from escaping, but make no mistake, everyone above knows exactly what is happening down here. Torture was not chaos, it was a system. In medieval Europe, chambers like this existed everywhere, from England's Tower of London to the dungeons of French castles to the inquisitorial cells of Spain and Germany. Who ran them? Not some random sadist, but officials of the state and church, the questioners, the masters of pain, men trained not to kill you instantly, but to drag you to the edge of death and keep you breathing. Torture had a purpose: extracting confessions, punishing enemies, or simply putting fear into others. Even the architecture whispered cruelty. The walls sweated moisture, dripping onto chains bolted into stone. Wooden beams bore claw marks where other prisoners had scratched desperately for escape. Rats scurried freely, feeding on scraps of bread or whatever fell from a prisoner too weak to resist. The chamber itself was a weapon: the darkness, the stench, the silence between screams, all designed to break you before a single tool touched your skin. The first thing you would notice is the noise: chains dragging, boots echoing on stone, the splash of water in a bucket, a priest whispering prayers, and above it all, screams, piercing, guttural, endless screams. They echo through the corridors, sometimes stopping abruptly, sometimes fading into sobs. Imagine sitting shackled, waiting your turn, forced to listen as the man before you begs for mercy. Sometimes torturers would deliberately stage the suffering so you could hear it, because fear, historians agree, was the most powerful weapon. Psychological torture came first. You would be shown the tools, the rack, the thumb screws, the pincers glowing red in a brazier. In Germany, this was called the Tischen, the showing of instruments. Sometimes that was enough. Prisoners confessed before a single bone was broken. But if you did not, they had all night. Commands would bark out, pull tighter again. You would know your turn was next. Some prisoners began screaming before they were touched, breaking under the weight of anticipation alone. And that was the point. Pain began long before iron met flesh. And then the footsteps come for you. Now the real nightmare begins. The rack, the most infamous. A wooden frame with rollers at each end. They tie your wrists to one side, your ankles to the other. Then slowly they turn the wheel. Tendons stretch, muscles tear, joints crack out of their sockets. The pain is not sharp at first, it is burning, pulling, an agony that grows second by second until you hear your own shoulder snap like dry wood. People fainted, but fainting never saved them. Water thrown in your face, and the torment continued. Then there are the thumb screws, a deceptively simple device, iron vices that crush your fingers or toes one turn at a time. Flesh bursts, nails rip off, bones crumble. Chroniclers wrote that the pain was so focused, so blinding that victims screamed as though their entire body was being torn apart, or the strappado, perhaps worse than the rack. They tie your wrists behind your back, hoist you by a rope, and drop you. Your arms wrench out of their sockets instantly. Then they do it again and again. Some victims never use their arms again, even if they survived. And if you think the breaking wheel was merciful, think again. They tied you to a giant wagon wheel, then smashed your limbs with an iron bar, deliberately avoiding vital organs, so you stayed alive, broken, bent around the spokes. Sometimes they left victims displayed in public, bones poking through skin to die over days. Other tools filled the chamber, the pair of anguish, an expanding iron gag rammed into the mouth, iron boots that crushed legs, and the brazen bowl, where victims roasted inside a bronze statue while pipes turned their screams into the bellow of an animal. Each tool was a masterpiece of suffering, and every second you would beg for death. Medieval torturers were not doctors, but they understood the body frighteningly well. The goal was not to kill, it was to prolong. They learned which veins could be cut without bleeding you out. They knew how to suffocate you until you blacked out, then revive you again. They experimented with burning flesh just enough to see your nerves, but not enough to end life. One infamous device, the iron chair, heated with coals beneath, roasted victims alive, but slowly, hour after hour. Inquisitors sometimes ordered salt rubbed into wounds or rats placed in cages against the belly, then heated, forcing the animals to burrow into the victim to escape. They studied how long the human body could scream before the voice shredded. How long a man could stay conscious when his joints were dislocated. Torture was their laboratory, and pain their science. Some torturers even kept crude notes, records of how many turns of a screw or how many drops of the strappado a body could endure before breaking. These were not sadists improvising, they were professionals in the art of agony. You would not last because they did not want you to last. Survival was not the point, breaking you was. But how could such horrors be justified? In the eyes of kings and bishops, torture was not cruelty, it was duty. The Church sanctioned it during the Inquisition. Heretics, witches, and blasphemers were purified through pain. The logic was twisted. Saving your soul was worth destroying your body. Civil courts too embraced it. In 13th and 14th century France and Germany, confessions obtained under torture were legally binding. Judges believed truth revealed itself under suffering. After all, who could endure such torment without admitting guilt? Bernard G., the Dominican inquisitor, wrote that torture should be moderate, but moderate could still mean shattered bones and permanent disfigurement. Women accused of witchcraft were stripped naked, shaved to search for devil's marks, and tormented until they named others. Kings saw it as power, nobles used it as punishment, and townspeople sometimes gathered outside dungeons, eager for the public spectacle of broken bodies wheeled into daylight. It was not madness, it was organized, legal, sacred in their eyes. And that is what makes it worse. Hollywood loves spikes, guillotines, and Iron Maidens, but much of what you think you know is myth. The Iron Maiden, for example, was a 19th century invention displayed in museums, but never used in the Middle Ages. Real torture was not about quick deaths with fancy contraptions, it was about slow, grinding humiliation. Victims were not always killed immediately, many were returned to their cells, crippled but alive, to face another session the next day. Some survived weeks, even months of repeated torment before execution. Others were paraded half dead as living warnings. Execution was not the end goal, the process itself was the punishment. The reality is more terrifying than the myths, because the true horror was not exotic machines, it was the ordinary cruelty of rope, iron, and fire used with precision and patience. So, would you survive? Picture yourself strapped to the rack, listening to the creak of wood as your body tears apart, or hanging from the strappado, your shoulders wrenched from their sockets. Could you hold your silence? Could you keep your secrets? Could you endure even 5 minutes? History says no. Even the strongest knights, the most devout monks, the proudest rebels, all broke. Some begged to confess crimes they never committed. Others screamed prayers, curses, anything to make it stop. And when it finally did stop, the trauma followed them forever. Survival was not about strength, it was about luck. If the torturer grew bored, if the court lost interest, if death finally came as mercy, and you sitting here in the chamber with the iron glowing in the brazier, and the ropes tightening around your wrists, your 5 minutes are already up. Because in here, time does not move normally. 5 minutes feels like 5 hours, 5 hours feels like 5 lifetimes. And a lifetime in this place is worse than death itself. 5 minutes in a medieval torture chamber was enough to break the strongest soul, to erase identities, to turn defiance into desperate screams. And if you think you would do better, remember the screams you heard at the start, The ones that were not yours, now they are. If you want to uncover more brutal truths of history, more horrors hidden in the past, subscribe and step carefully because next time it might not be the dungeon you wake up.